The sunlight fades. A group of vampires gradually awakens. They fix their gaze on the two survivors.
Get to the sunlight!
The man holds off the vampire on him, telling the boy to find a place to hide. The man picks up a stake from the ground and stabs it at the enemy. After taking down two, HH desperately runs away, but is dragged back into the darkness by a vampire. In a critical moment, the boy starts the car. He crashes through the cinema's curtain, and sunlight spills onto the grass, instantly igniting all the vampires. But a powerful boss hides in the shadows. Will the two be able to escape the town safely? Inside a grocery store in Jerusalem Grove Town, worker Lino is speaking with a wealthy businessman from London. The businessman asks him for help moving some items, and provides specific instructions. The cargo ship will arrive at the port at 6 in the evening. Inside is a wooden box, filled with ancient treasures, so he must be careful while transporting it. The businessman instructs Lino to deliver the box to the seller of the Marden estate. That night, Lino and his helper arrive at the estate. This place is known for many ghost stories, and the two muster their courage, carrying the box into the cellar. Unexpectedly, the box is too heavy, and the helper slips, breaking a corner of the box. A pile of dirt spills out. Lino does not want to investigate further. He just wants to complete the task and leave. The next second, he heard the call of Satan. Fortunately, the helper brings him back to his senses. The two hurriedly leave the estate. On the day of the autumn equinox in 1975, writer Ben Mills returns to his hometown. Grove Town, the eerie Marden estate, stands on the cliff, overlooking the town. Childhood nightmares surface in his mind. He returns seeking inspiration for a new book. The town was established in 1710, with a population of just over 1,000. Mills plans to rent a place to stay, and he bought the Marden estate. The real estate agent introduces that the new owner is named Strick, a wealthy businessman from England. He runs a Barlow Strick furniture store. Across the street, the secretary at the real estate center, Susan. She is a fan of Mills' work, and helps him find a suitable house. After settling in, Mills goes to the library to research some materials. Susan happens to return some books, and the librarian recognized Mills. He whispers to Susan some gossip, saying that 20 years ago, there was a terrible car accident on Harrow Way. A drunk driver crashed and killed a couple, and they were Mills' parents. The sound catches their attention. Susan intentionally speaks loudly, saying, "I want to go to the movies tonight." She is sure that Mills will come looking for her after hearing it. It turns out Susan's guess was correct. In the evening, the two chat at the drive-in theater. Mills mentioned that he has always been writing other people's stories. Now that he is back in town, he intends to write his own story. At the same time, two children come out of the Macy house. They are preparing to head home before dark. Mr. Strick stops his car and asks the two kids if they want a ride. Danny is very cautious. He refused the other party's kindness. He and his brother Raphael sneak down a path, hoping to shake off the strange man. Raphael plays his harmonica for courage, but Strick follows them, covering Raphael's mouth. Strick abducts him. When Danny realized something is wrong, the two have already disappeared. Strick takes Raphael back to the estate.
The master needs sacrifice before he can begin to transform your town into his image.
The master Strick speaks of his named Barlow, and his furniture store is named after him. Strick shouts the master's name, and the surrounding candles extinguish. A monster approaches Raphael, and blood splatters onto Strick's face. The boy's screams vanish into the night sky. Soon, news of Raphael's disappearance spreads throughout the town. But a week passes, and there are still no leads. Danny is deeply affected, as he cannot remember the events surrounding his brother's disappearance. Mills has been helping the villagers search, but they remain somewhat hostile toward him. After all, Mills has just arrived, and local children have gone missing. This easily raises suspicions against him. Fortunately, Mills has an alibi. Susan heard the news from the police. Due to the long duration of the disappearance, they plan to abandon large-scale searches. That evening, Danny goes to bed, and he heard a sound of a harmonica. Danny thinks his brother has returned. He steps into the yard to check. Danny walks into the fog-filled grass, calling out his brother's name loudly. At this moment, he found a harmonica on the ground, and heard a noise from the seesaw behind him. The next second, a hand lifts Danny into the air, and immediately after, the lady of the house wakes from her dream.
Danny? I feel sick.
Danny has developed severe anemia. his body cannot produce enough red blood cells. The situation is not optimistic. In the evening, Danny feels thirsty. His mother plans to find a nurse. Unexpectedly, Danny rips the blood transfusion bag and begins to drink the blood directly. Before long, the boy loses his breath. The Greeley family has lost 2 sons, and the young man Mike in town helps bury the deceased in the graveyard. During a lull in the priest's officiating of the funeral, he leans against a tree to have his lunch. In a moment of distraction, he accidentally falls asleep until evening. Mike gets up to continue filling the dirt, but unexpectedly, he heard a banging sound from the coffin. Then he heard Danny's voice calling for help. Although Mike is scared, his first reaction is to jump down to save him, but Danny in the coffin has his eyes closed and looks nothing like a living person. Mike climbs back up to continue filling the dirt, but in the moment he turns around, Danny has vanished. In the next moment, the boy suddenly lunges at him and knocks Mike into the coffin. Later that evening, Danny's homeroom teacher Mr. Ma saw Mike at the bar in town. He sits alone in a dark corner and looks quite pale. Mr. Ma asks him what's wrong, and Mike explained. He lost consciousness at the funeral. He doesn't know how long he had been asleep, and wakes up feeling completely fatigued. He only remembers seeing a pair of eyes in his dream. Mr. Ma is concerned about the young man, so he invites Mike to stay at his house tonight. Tomorrow morning, they will go see a doctor. That night, Mr. Ma settles Mike in, and unintentionally noticed the bite marks on Mike's neck. Mr. Ma's expression changes slightly, as he seems to think of something terrifying. He paces anxiously on the first floor, when suddenly a loud noise comes from outside. A shadow darts up to the second floor. Mr. Ma goes to seek help from Mills.
Do you have a cross of any kind or a St. Christopher's medallion?
What's going on, man?
He leads the 2 back to his home, where all the lights are turned off. The 3 bravely ascend to the second floor, to find Mike lying in bed. His body is cold and there is no pulse. The bite marks on his neck have vanished. Mr. Ma can't help but recall the legends about vampires. It is said that the bite marks disappear after a person bitten dies, and the transformation time can range from a few minutes to several days. There are bloodstains left on Mike's pillow, seemingly confirming Mr. Ma's suspicions. Mills tells him to contact the police and say that he saw the ailing Mike at the bar. He kindly invited Mike to come home to rest, and that he died in his sleep. Do not mention anything about vampires. Before long, doctors and police arrived at the scene. A female doctor asks Mr. Ma about Danny's anemia. Mills is still holding the cross, and both look flustered. She vaguely sensed something is amiss. Meanwhile, Danny has transformed into a vampire, and he knocks on his friend Macy's window. Danny lures her to open the window.
Mr. Barlow wants to meet you, Mark.
In a critical moment, Macy grabs a cross from the side and thrusts it in Danny's face, scaring him away. Macy secretly resolves to save his friend from Barlow. Macy flips through vampire comics, taking note of their weaknesses. For example, they cannot be exposed to direct sunlight, they fear crosses, and are burned by holy water. On the other side, Mr. Ma is also researching books about vampires. Halfway through, Mike has already completed his transformation. Mr. Ma grabs the cross, and Mike is pushed back into the darkness by the holy light. Mr. Ma carefully checks each room, but is knocked down by Mike in the dark. Mr. Ma rolls down the stairs, and is cornered by Mike. Fortunately, Mr. Ma finds the cross,
I revoke my invitation!
and successfully drives Mike away. The next day, the hospital received more news. Danny's mother has suddenly died. Mike also disappeared from the morgue. The female doctor can no longer contain herself, so she goes to question Mr. Ma. As soon as she entered, she saw Mr. Ma head covered in blood, having just woken up from fainting since last night. At this point, Mr. Ma has no choice but to confess to the doctor that several informed individuals are discussing ways to deal with the vampire. The power of faith, stakes, crosses, as well as white roses and garlic. These are the things used to fight vampires. Although it sounds implausible, Mr. Ma contacts the florist and learned that all the witty roses have been purchased by a man. The only one in town that fits the description is Strick. He is certainly aiding the vampire, because the latter cannot operate during the day. Mr. Ma speculated that the first missing child must have been a sacrifice to celebrate Barlow's arrival. The second child, Danny, is likely to have been transformed. They can dig up the grave to see if there is a body. The female doctor doesn't want to disturb the dead, saying that Danny's mother died in the same manner as her son. She is currently lying in the morgue, and they can go check if the body is still there. While they are working overtime on the investigation, Macy arrives holding a wooden sword and goes to the Martin estate. Macy opened the cellar door to check inside and happened to run into Mr. Ma. He wants Macy to leave the dangerous place as someone has locked the cellar door. Mr. Ma lights a candle and leads Macy to find an exit. The two finally find a door, but there are no stairs to climb. Mr. Ma helps Macy climb up, only to be attacked by the vampire Barlow. Macy is also captured by Strick. On the other side, Mills and the others are guarding Danny's mother's body. They want to test whether she will suddenly transform into a vampire before their eyes. It turned out that Mr. Ma's speculation was correct. Soon, Danny's mother resurrects on the spot. The three make a cross using tape and wooden sticks, and since Mills is educated, he knows many blessing words. The cross, empowered by the blessings, shines brightly. Unfortunately, soon, the tape comes loose, and the cross loses its effectiveness. Danny's mother lunges at the female doctor. Mills grabs her from behind. The female doctor seizes the opportunity to grab a scalpel, waving it around carelessly. But the vampire is not afraid of blades. In a critical moment, Susan quickly rebinds the cross and successfully drives away Danny's mother. The female doctor's neck is bitten. She has no way. The doctor gives herself a rabies vaccine, and Mills grabs the cross to test it. The doctor shows no adverse reaction, indicating that the vaccine is working. It can now be confirmed that vampires exist. Professional matters should be handled by professionals. Mills decides to seek help from Father Callahan. That evening, the three go to gather with Mr. Ma. They saw Mike and Danny squatting on the roof. The whole house is dark. Mills speculated that Mr. Ma has been captured. If this continues, the entire town will be infected. The scene shifts to inside the Martin estate. Macy breaks free from the ropes and strikes Strick dead with a stick. Macy shares the same thoughts as Mills. He has also escaped to the local church. Macy tells everyone that Mr. Ma has been assimilated. After saying this, he pulls out a cup, and Macy fills it with holy water.
I think he's the head vampire. I didn't get him, but I got his servant, Striker.
After working for a while, they are not as useful as children. The priest decides to go to the Martin estate to rescue people, and they bravely enter the cellar. Heavy breathing sounds fill the air. Mills inspects a glass bottle, but unexpectedly, Mr. Ma suddenly roars. He instinctively lunges at Mills, but Mills misses the vampire's heart. In a critical moment, the priest and others burst open the cellar door, and sunlight drives Mr. Ma back. Mills grips a stake tightly, and he pierces Mr. Ma's heart. But before dying, Mr. Ma warned them that tonight, Barlow will come for their families. They plan to first transfer their relatives to the church for refuge. Although group action is safer, currently, there are only half an hour until sunset, so they must split up to find their families and agree to meet at the church before sunset. Mills follows Susan to find her mother. The woman looks pleasantly surprised. She says she has met a perfect man.
He promised he'd take care of us, Susie, and I said I'd do whatever it takes. He asked me to serve him and...
In the next moment, a vampire in the darkness lunges at Susan. Fortunately, Mills reacts quickly and pulls the girl out of the house. As for Macy, things are not going well, because adults don't listen to children. Even with the priest there to testify, the two stubborn adults refuse to go to the church. Just then, there is a knock at the door outside. The male homeowner immediately goes to open the door, and Barlow took the opportunity to sneak in and bite Marcy's mother to death. Then the male homeowner outside is also killed. The priest pulls out a cross to intimidate Barlow. He tells Macy to escape, but the priest's faith is not strong enough. The cross in his hand cannot unleash its power. Soon, Macy hears the priest's screams, and he can only continue to run wildly. Macy climbs into the treehouse like a monkey, and quickly shuts the doors and windows. As long as Macy doesn't open the door and invite them in, the vampires cannot enter. They can only surround the outside, continuously calling Macy's name. This night is destined to be difficult. At the same time, Mills is driving Susan, rushing to the church, but she has already been infected by the vampire. As soon as Susan enters the church, she begins to feel burning pain all over. The female doctor knows that getting a vaccine now is useless. She pulls out a stake from her bag. The doctor prepares to kill Susan. Suddenly, she knocks Mills over and escapes. Mills disregards the danger and chases after her into the darkness. It is then that Mills realized The entire street is filled with vampires. Mills runs back to the church. Fortunately, he has good luck. Mills stabs and kills the vampire Mike. The female doctor pulls Mills into the church. They close the door tightly and breathe a sigh of relief. Mills asks the doctor, "Why hasn't the sheriff come?" As soon as he finishes speaking, the body of a police officer crashes through the window into the church. The doctor explained that, when she sought help from the police, the sheriff was preparing to escape. He couldn't escape the town even in death. The next morning, the two drive around the streets, finding not a single person in sight. They see the priest's tragic fate, and the note left by Macy on the table. He says he wants to kill Barlow to avenge his parents. At this moment, Macy breaks down the door of Strick's shop. In the process, he accidentally cuts his palm. Macy's blood drips onto the floor, leaving a trail of blood. Macy glances at the mirror by chance. In the next moment, Danny suddenly lunges at him. He pins down his former friend, but Macy is quicker and stabs Danny in the heart. This little guy has incredible mental resilience. As he leaves the shop, Macy saw Mills and the doctor, but Macy doesn't want to run away with them. If they don't solve the problem now, Barlow will eventually kill us all. The female doctor thinks this makes sense. After all, daytime is when vampires are at their weakest. Mills looked around and noticed there are no cars on the street. Mills takes Macy and the doctor to the drive-in theater. The place is filled with parked cars. Presumably, all the transformed vampires are hiding here. Soon, Mills spots Susan's car. He runs over and opens the trunk, finding her curled up inside, asleep. Mills cannot bring himself to harm her, so he hands Susan over to the doctor. Suddenly, someone shoots her dead. It turns out to be Susan's mother, defending her daughter. She has become Barlow's new servant, and tasked with protecting these sleeping vampires. Mills and Macy evade the gunfire from Susan's mother. The sun slowly sets behind the screen. The vampires inside the cars gradually awaken. Mills starts to run, calling Macy to run towards the sunlight. In the next moment, he is knocked down by a vampire. Macy doesn't have time to save him, and can only choose to save herself. Meanwhile, Mills kills two vampires. He grabs his bag and runs towards the sunlight. However, a vampire grabs his ankle. It prepares to drag Mills back into the darkness. Just at that critical moment, Macy starts the car and crashes into the screen. With the cover gone, sunlight immediately pours onto the ground. The vampires are burned to ashes. The grass is filled with fire people, but Susan's mother does not give up on her idea to take down the outsiders. Mills ducks behind the car to avoid bullets, and Macy directly hits Susan's mother, killing her. The sunset is imminent. The two look around, and they spot a truck. Mills pries open the truck's cargo, and sees Barlow's coffin. They work together to drag it to the grass, but the coffin lid won't budge. The sunlight is fading. Mills finally finds a crowbar. They miss the sunlight overhead, and are thrown back by a tremendous force. The two hide in a shop, and are attacked by Susan. Macy is knocked outside during the struggle, and Mills fights with Susan. They turn on the projector in the cinema. Macy saw Barlow standing in that beam of white light. He gets up and runs. Meanwhile, Mills finally hardens his heart. He breaks a chair leg, and stabs Susan in the heart. On the other side, Macy hides among the pile of cars, and starts a car to create confusion. Macy plays a game with Barlow, but soon, he is caught by Barlow. At the critical moment, Mills successfully rescues Macy, and ends the life of the vampire Barlow. The two prepare to drive out of the town. The film concludes here. The film is adapted from the horror master Stephen King's novel of the same name. The original work cleverly depicts the ensemble of American small towns, making it feel chilling and terrifying. Unfortunately, the film version does not recreate the atmosphere of the town. Children in Stephen King's works are always portrayed as powerful. Thus, several adults in the film mainly serve as plot devices. Only the black child Gordy is brave and resourceful. Looking through the cast list, we can found that this film is also produced by James Wan. However, in many respects, this film is a rather mediocre adaptation.